everyone, and welcome to today's Bookmas video. Today I will be doing the Christmas Nativity book tag. This tag was actually created by some of my amazing friends here on BookTube, and those are Lou from Christian Faith and Fiction, Holly from Lovely Day with Holly, Katie from Paperbacks and Ponytails, and I'm pretty sure there was someone else, and for the life of me, I cannot remember who. My memory has been so bad. So if you helped out with this tag, please let me know in the comments because my brain is just, I'm so forgetful. But this tag is such a fun one. It has to do with the Nativity, obviously. So it's about Jesus' birth and his coming into this world and the reason we celebrate Christmas. And I'm so excited to go through each question. I actually have multiple books for the majority of these questions because I just couldn't help myself. So let's just go ahead and get started. Otherwise, we'll be here all day. But before that, I just want to quickly mention that if you hear some noise, it's a busy house. I have a big family. There's a lot going on today. So if you hear any noise, that's all that it is. It's just everyone moving around. But let's just go ahead and get started with the first question, which is the Angel Gabriel, a story that shares the good news of salvation. So I was going to use A Voice in the Wind for this because it's pretty obvious that this book is set in the early church. You know, it features a Christian main character and all of that, but I feel like I talk about A Voice in the Wind way too much. So I picked some books that I don't talk about as much. Two of them are biblical fiction, but they share the good news of salvation in slightly different ways. The first one is The Thief by Stephanie Lansome, and this one is set during the time that Jesus was actually ministering on earth. But our main characters are, I don't think Bible characters. I think they were just fictional characters living during this time. And our main character is basically a thief, and this is how she survives. And she encounters Jesus, and the story goes from there. This is definitely a very beautiful salvation story, and I need to reread this because it's been so long, but I remember absolutely adoring it. And this next one is set during the early church, and that is So Shines the Night by Tracy Higley. This is another one I haven't read in such a long time, but I remember it being so impactful. And it does share the good news of salvation. It is set during the early church, so you have the time of the apostles and them proclaiming the gospel. So there's that one. And then the last one is one that I recently read, and that is In a Far Off Land by Stephanie Lansome. And this one is actually a retelling of the prodigal son story, which is from the Bible, but it is set during the Great Depression, this book. So it's sharing the good news of, you know, God's grace and mercy, but in America during the Great Depression, Hollywood, and all of that. So this is an amazing book. Question 2 is No Room in the Inn, a book that is too big to fit on your shelf standing up. And I honestly have nothing to answer for this book. All of the books that I own do fit on my shelves, so just not going to answer this question. Question 3 is Wrapped in Swaddling Cloths, a book that gives you a cozy feeling. There are plenty of books that give me a cozy feeling, but some of the coziest of books, in my opinion, are Little Women, of course, Anne of Green Gables, which who doesn't find this cozy? This book is absolutely amazing. The Nutcracker by E.T.A. Hoffman. This is the original Nutcracker story, and I personally found it super cozy. One of my favorite fairy tale retellings, we have The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale, and this one is also very cute and cozy. And then the last one is The Lost Spells by Robert Macfarlane, and this is illustrated by Jackie Morris. So Robert Macfarlane wrote the poetry. This is a poetry collection. And Jackie Morris is the amazing artist. And this poetry collection has some of the most beautiful watercolor art I've ever seen. It's like the end pages too. You have some moths. Just look at that. Absolutely beautiful. But yeah, this one definitely makes me feel very cozy. Question 4 is The Manger, a main character with humble beginnings. So first we have Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, and this is a high fantasy where our main character actually starts off living as basically like a street thief. She doesn't have a home, and yeah, she definitely comes from humble beginnings. Then we have a classic with a character who comes from very humble beginnings, and that is Oliver Twist by Dickens. This is actually the first Dickens book I ever read, so it has a very special place in my heart. But yeah, Oliver, he comes from some quite difficult beginnings, that's for sure. And then I have a trilogy here where the main characters from each book definitely do come from humble beginnings, and that is the Shadows over England series. The third book, I would say it's the male lead, it's not the female lead from the third book, but in the first 2 books, we have this one, which is A Name Unknown, and then we have A Song Unheard, and both of the women in this book were basically also living on the street and were pickpockets, and that's how they survived. So they also came from very humble beginnings. And then the male lead in this book was part of that group. So characters from very humble beginnings. Also, this is an amazing trilogy, and I need to reread it because I love it so, so much. Question 5 is The Heavenly Hosts Singing, a book with a musical theme. So I just mentioned this book, but that is the second book in the Shadows Over England series, A Song Unheard. This one heavily features classical music and particularly with the violin, and I adored this book. So, so good. Another one that features music is A Note Yet Unsung by Tamara Alexander, and this is probably my favorite Tamara Alexander so far. Out of the ones that I've read, this one is so good, and it also has to do with classical music. It's set in America, and such a good one. Need to reread that. A recent read is The Enchanted Sonata by Heather Dixon Walwork, and this one has to do with music as well. Our main character is a pianist, and lots of music in this book. Love this one. Question 6 is Shepherds and Sheep, a story that contains an animal. This one I actually had to sit on for a while. I couldn't remember very many books that I've read with a lot of animals, but I did remember Love in the Silver Lining. That one has a lot of dogs, and my heart was just melting. Anytime the dogs were on scene, they played a pretty important role in the story. So Love in the Silver Lining. There are also some animals in the Chronicles of Narnia, particularly in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. So that one works for that as well. And in Apple Cider Slaying, there are 2 adorable kittens in this book. So animals in that one. And then my absolute favorite children's book that I read when I was little, and it's one of my favorite books of all time, even now, and that is Charlotte's Web. That one has a lot of animals as well, set on a farm, and oh, my heart. I need to reread this as well, but Charlotte's Web, such a precious story. Number 7 is Three Wise Men, a story that involves travel. And travel in books is one of my favorite, I guess, tropes or plot elements. Like, I don't read a lot of books with a lot of travel in it, but I definitely want to read more. So if you have any recommendations, let me know. But the first one here is Where We Belong by Lynn Austen. And this one's actually inspired by a true story of 2 sisters who traveled from Chicago to the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. And they, during the 19th century, were looking for codexes, which are like the older version of books, but biblical codexes. So they were looking for biblical manuscripts and things like that. So there's lots of travel in this one. Around the World in 80 Days. Lots of travel. This is iconic and such a good book. The Mysteries of Udolpho. This one has a lot of travel as well, but it's mostly between France and Italy and then within France itself. The travel scenes are very, very long, but it has travel in it, so that's a good one. And then one of my favorite books from this year, we have Jewel of the Nile by Tessa Afshar. And in this one, the characters do travel from Kush to, I forget what city it was, but I think it's where Israel is, and then also to Rome. So there's some traveling going on in this one, and it's actually along the Mediterranean, so it's on a ship, which I loved. So great book. These next 3 questions are really fun as they are inspired by the gifts that the Magi brought to Jesus, so gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The first one being gold, and that is a book with gold on the cover. And so I have Russian Tales. This I was gifted by the lovely Nicole from Lilac Cottage, and this one has gold on the cover. It's just such a beautiful book. The little bookmark is also gold, so love it. Frankincense is a book that was gifted to you, and Russian Tales definitely works for that. And then Myrrh is a book that made you cry. So we have a few here. First up, we have these 2. This one, I think I teared up, but this one, like, I sobbed. So definitely great books, very emotional. Another one that I tend to mention when I'm talking about books that make me emotional, and that is The Hero of Ages. The last Mistborn Era 1 book, that ending, I was a goner. And then one that I don't really talk about, but it definitely did make me cry, which surprised me, and that is Blood for Blood by Ryan Groudon. This is the second book in the Wolf by Wolf duology. And I cried because of something that happens towards the end, and I just wasn't okay. I wasn't okay just because I was really hoping things would turn out differently, but I'm not unhappy with how they turned out. I just was very, very distraught, but very good book. Oh, and also Little Women makes me bawl my eyes out every time, so there's that one. Question 11 is Mary and Joseph, a book with a big surprise. I could have gone the route of sharing some mysteries, but I decided to do it a little bit different. So these books, the characters all experienced something, I guess, surprising or life-altering, and I'm not going to give any spoilers, but the first one is Ross Poldark, and this one is set in the 1700s, and our main character, Ross, returns from the Revolutionary War in America. I think it was the Revolutionary War, I think. He returns home to Cornwall, and something really, really huge happened while he was gone. Actually, a couple things happened. He returns home, and it's a big surprise waiting for him. Not the most pleasant surprise, but definitely a surprise. An obvious one, A Christmas Carol. Scrooge gets the surprise of his life by being visited by the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future. So Lots of surprises for Scrooge. And then another one is Land of Silence by Tessa Afshar. And this one is about the woman in the New Testament with the bleeding problem. And then she, if you've read the Bible, you know she touched Jesus's cloak and received healing. And so big surprise for her in her life. It's a beautiful retelling of that story. So yeah, that's another one. And then the very last question, number 12, is Jesus, the story with the most Christian content. I'm not quite sure. Like I know what that means, but I'm not sure if the question means like the most sharing of the gospel or the most growth a character experiences in their faith. And I guess I could go with Love in a Little White Lie by Tammy L. Gray because the main character starts off basically an atheist. So I guess that has some good Christian content. And I already mentioned this book, but So Shines the Night. It's really, really dark because it is set in Ephesus and there's a lot of spiritual oppression during this time and, you know, Paul coming to Ephesus and everything. So this one definitely has quite some good Christian content. And then the last one is actually this trilogy, and I have it in this omnibus, and it is the Acts of Faith trilogy by Davis Bunn and Jeanette Oak. It's not my absolute favorite, you know, Christian fiction trilogy of all time, biblical fiction, but I do think that it tells a pretty powerful story, and it starts off set just after Jesus was crucified, if I'm not mistaken, and one of the centurions that I think he was present at the crucifixion, he's one of the main characters. But this entire series is just about the very, very early church, like right after Jesus's crucifixion, and lots of good content in terms of faith and the work of the Holy Spirit and everything. So a great book. And then I would probably say A Voice in the Wind too, but that's an obvious one. So that is it for these questions. That's it for the Christmas nativity tag. And I'm not going to tag anyone specific, but if you would like to do this tag, consider yourselves tagged. It's a really fun one. If you don't have a channel, I'd actually love to know your answers for these questions. It is a longer tag, so if you don't feel like typing up everything, I completely get it, but I'd love to know if you would be interested in letting me know. So that's it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see each of you in my next video. Bye.